I was sitting in my office in downtown Chicago when my phone rang. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in March, and I remember the exact time because that's when my entire world collapsed. "Mr. Chen, this is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Chicago Police Department. I need you to come to Northwestern Memorial Hospital immediately. It's about your brother." My brother David, my younger brother by 3 years. The guy I'd shared a room with growing up, taught to throw a baseball, helped get into college. My heart was already racing. "What happened? Is he okay?" There was a pause. "Sir, your brother is alive, but he's in critical condition. There's been an incident. How soon can you get here?" I grabbed my keys and ran. The drive from my law office in the Loop to Northwestern took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. My mind was spinning through possibilities. Car accident, heart attack. David was only 39, healthy, a marathon runner. What could have put him in critical condition? I found Detective Martinez in the ICU waiting room. She was a woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes that had seen too much. "Mr. Chen, I'm sorry to meet you under these circumstances. Your brother was brought in 3 hours ago. A neighbor found him collapsed in his driveway." "Collapsed? What do you mean collapsed?" She looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Chen, your brother has been poisoned. Arsenic poisoning, to be specific. The doctors say he's been ingesting small amounts over several weeks, possibly months." The word hung in the air like a guillotine. Poisoned. That's impossible. Who would? But I stopped because I already knew who. There was only one person who would benefit from David's death. Rachel, his wife. "We're investigating all possibilities," Detective Martinez said carefully. "But I need to ask you some questions about your brother's household, his relationships, his recent behavior." David had been married to Rachel for 5 years. They'd met at a charity gala in 2018, one of those fancy fundraisers for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Rachel was beautiful, charming, worked in pharmaceutical sales. Red flag number 1 that I missed. She knew a lot about medications and their effects. David was a software engineer at a tech startup that had just been acquired by Google. The acquisition made him wealthy, not billionaire wealthy, but comfortable. He'd cleared about $4.2 million after taxes from his equity. He'd told me about it excitedly over beers at our favorite sports bar. "Michael, I'm set for life. I'm thinking about retiring early, traveling with Rachel, maybe starting a family." I'd been happy for him. My little brother, the nerd who'd spent his teenage years coding in the basement, had made it big. He deserved every penny. Rachel had been thrilled too. Maybe a little too thrilled. I sat with Detective Martinez and tried to remember the details. Had David seemed sick lately? Yes, actually. Over the past few months, he'd complained about stomach issues, fatigue, numbness in his hands and feet. We'd had lunch together 6 weeks ago, and he'd barely touched his food. "I've been to 3 doctors," he'd told me. "They can't figure out what's wrong. They think it might be stress or early-onset neuropathy." Arsenic poisoning mimics a lot of common illnesses. That's what makes it so insidious. "When did this start?" Detective Martinez asked. I thought back. Maybe 4 months ago, November or December. He started canceling plans, saying he didn't feel well. I thought he was just working too hard. "And his relationship with his wife, how was that?" I hesitated. Here's the thing about family loyalty. You want to believe the best about people your loved ones choose, but I'd never liked Rachel. There was something off about her, something calculating behind the smile. Honestly, I never trusted her. David met her right around the time his startup was being acquired. The timing seemed convenient. Detective Martinez nodded, taking notes. "Did your brother have a will?" "Yes, he updated it after he got married. I helped him with some of the legal aspects. He left everything to Rachel." "Everything? The entire $4.2 million?" "Yes. And his life insurance policy, another $2 million. He wanted to make sure she was taken care of if anything happened to him. The detective's expression told me everything I needed to know. Rachel had a $6.2 million motive. They let me see David an hour later. My strong, healthy brother looked like a ghost. He was unconscious, hooked up to machines, IVs running into both arms. His skin had a grayish tint, and his hair, which had always been thick and dark, looked thin and brittle. A doctor named Patricia Hollies pulled me aside. "Mr. Chen, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Your brother has been systematically poisoned for at least 3 months, possibly longer. The arsenic levels in his blood are extraordinarily high. We're doing everything we can, but the damage to his organs is severe. His kidneys are failing. His liver is compromised, and there's neurological damage. Will he survive?" She looked at me with sympathy. "I don't know. The next 48 hours are critical. If he makes it through that, he'll need months of treatment and possibly dialysis for the rest of his life." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. And his cognitive function? Too early to tell. Arsenic poisoning can cause permanent neurological damage. Even if he survives, he may not be the same person. I sat with David that night, holding his hand, watching the monitors beep and flash. I thought about our childhood, about the time I taught him to ride a bike and he'd crashed into Mrs. Peterson's rose bushes. About high school, when he'd helped me pass calculus even though he was 2 grades behind me. About his wedding day, when he'd looked at Rachel like she was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen. And I thought about Rachel, who should have been here but wasn't. "Where is she?" I asked Detective Martinez when she checked in around 10 p.m. "Mrs. Chen, we've been trying to reach her. Her phone is going straight to voicemail." That's when I knew for certain. An innocent spouse would be here. A guilty one would be preparing to run. The police found Rachel the next morning at O'Hare International Airport. She was trying to board a flight to Sao Paulo, Brazil. One-way ticket, 2 large suitcases. And here's the kicker: $180,000 in cash found during a search of her bags. She'd withdrawn it from David's accounts over the past week, using the power of attorney he'd given her when he got too sick to manage his own finances. She'd planned this perfectly, or so she thought. Detective Martinez called me with the news. "We've arrested Rachel Chen on attempted murder charges. During the search of your brother's house, we found arsenic trioxide hidden in the garage, disguised as a cleaning product. We also found evidence she'd been researching arsenic poisoning for months." Evidence? Her laptop. Browser history shows searches for untraceable poisons, arsenic detection times, life insurance payout timelines, and countries without extradition treaties. She wasn't as careful as she thought. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt rage. This woman had spent months slowly murdering my brother, watching him suffer, probably comforting him while she continued to poison him. It was monstrous. David woke up on day 4. Barely. He couldn't speak clearly, couldn't move his left side, and didn't recognize me at first. The doctors said the neurological damage was significant. Over the following weeks, David improved slowly. He regained some movement, some speech. But he wasn't David anymore. The sharp, witty software engineer who could solve complex coding problems in his head was gone. In his place was someone who struggled to remember what day it was, who needed help eating, who would cry without warning. I hired the best rehabilitation team money could buy. David's money, technically, but I had medical power of attorney now. We moved him to the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, one of the best rehab facilities in the country. Meanwhile, the criminal case against Rachel moved forward. The evidence was overwhelming. The arsenic trioxide in the garage, with her fingerprints all over it. Her internet search history spanning 7 months. Bank records showing she'd been systematically draining David's accounts. Testimony from a pharmacist who'd noticed her buying unusual quantities of antacids, used to mix with arsenic to disguise the taste. Security footage from David's home showing her preparing his meals and drinks separately from her own. Text messages to her sister in Brazil discussing coming into money soon. A $50,000 deposit she'd made to a real estate company in Sao Paulo for a beachfront condo. Her lawyer tried to claim it was all circumstantial, that Rachel was innocent, that maybe David had been exposed to arsenic at work or through environmental contamination. The prosecution destroyed that argument. They showed that David's symptoms started within 2 weeks of Rachel taking over the cooking after their housekeeper quit. They showed that Rachel had looked up how long until arsenic kills. The same day, she'd increased David's life insurance policy from $1 million to $2 million. But here's where it gets worse. During the discovery process, I learned something that made me physically sick. I wasn't Rachel's first rodent. Her real name wasn't Michael Chen. It was Rachel Morrison. She changed it legally before meeting David. And Rachel Morrison had been married once before to a man named Bradley Steele in Phoenix, Arizona. Bradley had died 7 years ago from what was ruled as sudden organ failure at age 34. He'd been healthy, then suddenly became ill over several months. Doctors called it a mystery illness. He'd left Rachel everything, a $450,000 life insurance policy and a house in Scottsdale. The Phoenix police had investigated briefly but found no evidence of foul play. Rachel collected the insurance money, sold the house, and disappeared. Until she resurfaced in Chicago as Rachel Thompson, then Michael Chen after marrying David. The prosecution brought in a forensic investigator who'd worked the Bradley Steele case. At the time, we suspected something wasn't right, but we couldn't prove it. Rachel was cooperative, seemed devastated, and without modern forensic toxicology, arsenic poisoning can look like natural causes. We had no grounds for exhumation. Now they did. The Phoenix DA, working with Chicago prosecutors, got an order to exhume Bradley Steele's body. The results came back positive for arsenic poisoning. Rachel had killed before. The charges were upgraded. Now Rachel faced first-degree attempted murder of David Chen, first-degree murder of Bradley Steele, 2 counts of financial exploitation, wire fraud, money laundering, multiple counts of forgery and insurance fraud. If convicted on all counts, she was looking at life in prison without parole. I wanted her to rot. But I wanted something else even more. I wanted David to testify. I wanted him to face her in court and tell the world what she'd done. The prosecutors weren't sure he could do it. David's neurological damage meant his testimony might not be reliable. His memory was spotty. He got confused easily. A defense attorney could tear him apart on cross-examination. I worked with David every single day. We went through his memories, his relationship with Rachel, the timeline of his illness. On good days, he remembered everything clearly. On bad days, he thought Rachel was still his loving wife and couldn't understand why he was in a hospital. It was heartbreaking. The trial began in September, 6 months after David's poisoning. The courtroom was packed. The media had turned this into a national story. The Black Widow of Chicago, they called her. The serial poisoner. I attended every day of that trial. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, and I made sure Rachel could see me. I wanted her to know that David had someone fighting for him. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They walked the jury through every piece of evidence. Day 1 2, the medical evidence. Doctors testified about David's condition, the arsenic levels, the systematic nature of the poisoning. Day 3-4, the forensic evidence. The arsenic in the garage, the internet searches, the surveillance footage. Day 5-6, the financial evidence. Rachel's systematic draining of accounts, the insurance policies, the Brazil connection. Day 7. The Bradley Steele evidence. The exhumation results, the similarities between the cases, Rachel's pattern of behavior. Rachel's lawyer, a high-priced defense attorney named Marcus Webb, tried everything. He claimed David had been exposed to arsenic at work, debunked by environmental testing at the tech company. He claimed the internet searches were innocent curiosity, destroyed by the specific nature and timing of the searches. He claimed Rachel was a victim of circumstantial evidence. The jury wasn't buying it. Then came David's testimony. This was day 8 of the trial. I helped David get dressed that morning. He was nervous, confused about why he had to go to court. I explained it again, as I had explained it 100 times before. Rachel hurt you, David. She made you sick. We need to tell the judge what happened. He looked at me with those damaged eyes. Rachel wouldn't hurt me. She loves me. It killed me every time he said that. The arsenic had taken so much from him, including the ability to fully comprehend the betrayal. But on the stand, something miraculous happened. With the prosecutor's gentle questioning, David's memory sharpened. He described his symptoms, his confusion about being sick, his trust in Rachel to take care of him. She made me special smoothies, he said slowly. Every morning, she said they would help me feel better, but I just felt worse. Did you notice anything unusual about these smoothies? The prosecutor asked. David thought hard. They tasted bitter, like metal. I told her, but she said it was the protein powder. Did Rachel drink the smoothies too? No, she said she was allergic to one of the ingredients. The jury was riveted. Here was the victim, clearly damaged, struggling to speak, but telling the truth. Then Marcus Webb made a catastrophic mistake. He decided to cross-examine David aggressively, trying to highlight his cognitive issues to discredit his testimony. Mr. Chen, isn't it true that you don't remember most of the events from last winter? I remember Rachel made me smoothies. But you don't remember what day she started making them, do you? November, after Teresa quit. Teresa was the housekeeper. Webb hadn't expected such a specific answer. You remember the month, but do you remember feeling sick before November? No, I felt fine. I ran a marathon in October, 26 miles. Then I got sick. Webb tried several more times to trip David up, but David's core memories of the poisoning were clear. And every time Webb pressed him, David sounded more credible, more sympathetic. The jury was watching. A damaged man struggled to tell the truth about the woman who'd destroyed his life. It was powerful in a way no amount of forensic evidence could match. Rachel's defense rested after 2 days. They called character witnesses who said Rachel was kind and loving. They called a toxicologist who suggested alternative sources of arsenic exposure. None of it mattered. The prosecution's rebuttal was simple. They played a recording of Rachel's call to the insurance company made 2 days before David collapsed. Hi, yes, I'm calling to confirm the policy on David Chen. If something were to happen to him, what's the timeline for payout? Oh, wonderful. And it's definitely $2 million. Perfect. Thank you so much. The jury heard a woman who wasn't worried about her dying husband. They heard a woman checking on her investment. Closing arguments took a full day. The prosecutor, a brilliant woman named Catherine Park, painted a picture of calculated evil. Rachel Morrison, who became Rachel Chen, is a predator. She finds successful men, marries them, slowly poisons them, and takes everything they've worked for. She did it to Bradley Steele. She almost succeeded with David Chen. How many others might there be that we don't know about? That question haunted me. How many others? Look at David Chen, Catherine continued, gesturing to where David sat with his caregiver. He survived, but at what cost? A brilliant engineer who can barely remember his own phone number, a marathon runner who needs a walker, a man who loved his wife so much that even now, even after everything, part of him still can't accept what she did to him. That's not just attempted murder. That's the destruction of a human soul. Marcus Webb's closing argument was desperate. He tried to create reasonable doubt, tried to suggest that maybe, possibly, there was another explanation. But he couldn't explain away the totality of the evidence. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I sat in the hallway with David, who didn't really understand what was happening, but knew it was important because I kept holding his hand. When the jury came back, I felt my heart hammering. On the count of attempted first-degree murder of David Chen, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of first-degree murder of Bradley Steele. Guilty. Guilty on all 17 counts. Rachel didn't react. She just sat there stone-faced as her lawyer put his head in his hands. Sentencing came 2 months later. I submitted a victim impact statement, but I also helped David write one. On his good days, we worked on it together. What David wanted to say was simple. Rachel was my wife. I loved her. I trusted her. She took everything from me, not just my money or my health, but my future. I was going to have children with her. I was going to grow old with her. Now I can't work. I can't run. I can't even cook myself dinner some days. She stole my life while pretending to love me. That's what hurts most. Every smoothie she made, every time she held my hand while I was dying, she was lying. I don't know how to forgive that. I don't know if I want to. The Bradley Steele family also submitted statements. His mother, who was 68 years old, wrote about how she'd never understood why her healthy son suddenly died, how she'd blamed herself, wondered if there was something genetic she'd passed on, how learning the truth 7 years later was both relieving and devastating. I'll never get those 7 years back, she wrote. 7 years of wondering, of guilt, of not understanding. Rachel took my son and then she took my peace of mind. The judge was a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Rodriguez. She'd presided over hundreds of criminal cases in her 30-year career, but I could see this one affected her. Ms. Morrison, she said, refusing to use David's last name, in my 3 decades on the bench I've seen many types of criminals, but premeditated murder by poison is particularly heinous. It requires daily recommitment to the act of killing. Every time you prepared arsenic for your husbands, you made a choice. Every time you watched them suffer, you made a choice. Every time you researched how to avoid detection, you made a choice. She paused, looking at Rachel directly. You are not a person who killed in a moment of passion or rage. You are a person who methodically planned and executed murders for financial gain. You are a serial killer with a calculator instead of a knife. The sentence came down like a hammer. For the first-degree murder of Bradley Steele, life in prison without possibility of parole. For the attempted first-degree murder of David Chen, 40 years to run consecutively. For the financial crimes, an additional 25 years. Rachel would die in prison. She'd never see freedom again. She was 41 years old. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Justice, finally. But the story doesn't end there. After Rachel's conviction, I became obsessed with a question. Were there others? Rachel had moved around a lot before Phoenix. She'd lived in Portland, Seattle, Denver. What if there were other men, other victims? I hired a private investigator, a former FBI agent named Tom Morrison, no relation to Rachel, thank God. I gave him everything. Rachel's known aliases, her employment history, her timeline. It took him 3 months, but what he found made national news. Seattle, 2009. Rachel, then going by Rachel Thompson, had briefly dated a software developer named Marcus Webb who died suddenly of heart complications at age 36. She'd been a beneficiary on a $100,000 life insurance policy he'd taken out shortly before his death. Portland, 2011. Rachel, as Rachel Morgan, had been engaged to a real estate investor named Thomas Park. He broke off the engagement after becoming mysteriously ill. He survived. Tom tracked him down. Thomas Park was now 52, healthy, and stunned to learn what his ex-fiancée had become. She was always interested in my money, he told Tom. Always asking about my investments, my properties. When I got sick, she was so attentive, making me special meals, giving me vitamins. But then my sister came to visit and Rachel seemed annoyed. She left soon after, said she couldn't handle being with someone chronically ill. I thought she was just shallow. Now I think she was impatient. Denver, 2013. Rachel, as Rachel Stevens, had married a man named James Rodriguez. They were married for 8 months before he died in his sleep from what was ruled as sudden organ failure. He was 38 years old. Rachel inherited his house and a $200,000 life insurance policy. The pattern was clear. Rachel had been doing this for at least 15 years, maybe longer. She targeted successful men in their 30s and 40s, married or dated them, poisoned them slowly, and took their money. If they survived or got suspicious, she disappeared. If they died, she collected and moved on. Tom estimated that Rachel had killed at least 3 men, possibly 4, and attempted to kill at least 3 others, including David. Her total take from her victims was estimated at over $5 million. The Seattle and Denver police opened new investigations. They exhumed Marcus Webb's body, arsenic. They exhumed James Rodriguez's body, arsenic. Rachel was charged with 2 more counts of first-degree murder. She was already serving life without parole, so these charges were more about justice for the families than additional punishment. But the families deserved to know. The civil cases came next. I sued Rachel on David's behalf for everything she'd taken, plus damages for his ongoing care. The judgment was $8.3 million, the stolen money, the insurance payouts she tried to claim, and $4 million in damages for David's medical care and suffering. Rachel had hidden some of the money offshore, but federal investigators found most of it. We recovered about $3.7 million. It wasn't enough, not really. David's lifetime care would cost more than that, but it was something. I also went after her systematically, in every other way possible. I contacted every professional organization Rachel had ever been a part of. She'd claimed to be a certified pharmaceutical sales rep. That certification was revoked. She'd been on the board of a local charity. They removed her name from all their materials and donated any funds she'd raised to victims' rights organizations. I tracked down her family. Her parents lived in Florida, retired. They claimed they'd been estranged from Rachel for years, but I didn't buy it. I gave interviews to major media outlets, making sure everyone knew who they were, what their daughter had done. They eventually moved and changed their phone numbers. Good. I wanted Rachel to understand that she hadn't just destroyed David's life. She destroyed her own legacy. Every trace of Rachel Morrison, Rachel Thompson, Michael Chen, every identity she'd used, was now permanently associated with murder and betrayal. But my biggest focus was David. David lives with me now. I'm 42 and single, and honestly, I can't imagine dating anyone while my brother needs round-the-clock care. We live in a house in Evanston that I bought specifically because it's wheelchair accessible and has a first-floor bedroom for him. He has good days and bad days. On good days, David can hold conversations, remember recent events, even laugh at jokes. We watch Cubs games together, and sometimes he'll remember obscure statistics from seasons past. On bad days, he doesn't know where he is. He calls me by our father's name. He asks for Rachel. That's the hardest part. Despite everything, despite knowing intellectually what Rachel did, the damage to David's brain means he sometimes can't hold onto that knowledge. His emotions remember loving her even when his mind knows she hurt him. I've learned not to argue with him on those days. I just redirect him, distract him, wait for the confusion to pass. David will never work again. He's on permanent disability. His tech company, to their credit, continued his health insurance and provided a settlement. Google also quietly provided a substantial fund for his ongoing care. They didn't have to do that, but I think they felt guilty, even though they bore no responsibility. The neurologists say David's condition has stabilized. He won't get worse, but he won't get significantly better either. This is who he is now. Sometimes I'm angry about that. Sometimes I lie awake at night thinking about the brother I lost, the brilliant coder who could hack together a working prototype in a weekend, the marathon runner who convinced me to train with him and then left me in the dust at mile 18, the guy who gave the best man speech at his wedding and had everyone laughing and crying at the same time. That David is gone. Rachel killed him just as surely as if she'd put a bullet in his head. She just did it with arsenic and patience. Rachel is at Logan Correctional Center in downstate Illinois. She's in general population, and from what I hear, she's not popular. Prisoners have their own moral code, and people who kill family members are at the bottom of that hierarchy. She's tried to appeal her conviction. Twice. Both appeals were rejected. She's tried to get interviews with media outlets, probably hoping to profit from her story or garner sympathy. I've made sure to contact any outlet that considers it, reminding them of all her victims, providing them with David's current condition. No one has given her a platform. She did manage to send me one letter. It was intercepted by my lawyer, who asked if I wanted to read it. I said yes. The letter was 2 pages of self-justification and delusion. Rachel claimed she was a victim of circumstance, that she'd never meant to hurt anyone, that the arsenic was for some other purpose and had accidentally contaminated the food. She claimed David had misunderstood her intentions. She ended the letter with, "I still love David. I hope he understands that everything I did was because I loved him." I burned that letter in my fireplace. I watched every word turn to ash. Then I had my lawyer send a formal cease and desist order. No more letters, no more contact. As far as I'm concerned, Rachel Morrison is dead. Sometimes people ask me if I think the justice system worked, if Rachel's sentence was enough. Here's my answer. No punishment will ever be enough for what Rachel did. Life in prison. She still gets to wake up every morning. She still gets to breathe. My brother wakes up every morning confused and damaged. Bradley Steele, Marcus Webb, and James Rodriguez don't wake up at all. But the justice system did what it could. Rachel will never hurt anyone again. She'll die in a concrete cell, forgotten and despised. That's not nothing. The civil judgments mean that if she ever somehow gets out, if some miracle or legal technicality sets her free, she'll be financially destroyed. Every penny she earns will go to her victims. She'll spend the rest of her life being garnished. And the public nature of the case means Rachel can never reinvent herself again. Her face, her names, her methods are all over the internet. True crime podcasts have done episodes about her. Wikipedia has an article. If she lives to be 100 and somehow gets released, everyone will know who she is.